The first sight of Portofino feels almost like a painting that has quietly come to life. A small natural harbour wrapped in green hills and open sea, where tall, narrow houses in soft colours stand shoulder to shoulder along the water. Fishing boats drift beside polished yachts, cafe terraces spill onto the square, and everything moves with an easy, unhurried rhythm. Today, we invite you to walk here with us and to slow down for a while on this corner of the Ligurian coast. In this video, we follow the curve of the harbour, listening to footsteps on old stone and the gentle sound of water against the boats. We will slip into quiet side lanes, past tiny shops and shaded arcades, then climb towards the church above the village, where the view opens over the bay and the open Mediterranean beyond. This is not a rushed checklist of places to see. It is a calm documentary walk through one of the most famous small ports in Italy, a place where working boats, luxury yachts, locals and visitors all share the same piazza. As you watch, you can simply relax. Let your eyes wander across colours and details, and imagine the scent of the sea and the sound of voices carrying across the harbour. Portofino is one of those places where geography and atmosphere work together perfectly. The village sits in a small natural inlet on the Ligurian coast, sheltered by wooded hills and open to the blue of the Mediterranean. Behind the waterfront, steep slopes rise quickly, covered with olives, pines and villas hidden among the trees. So the whole bay feels like a tiny theatre that opens towards the sea. For centuries, this was a simple fishing village where life followed the rhythm of the tides and the seasons. Generations of families worked the water, repaired their boats on the shore, and brought their catch straight to the tables along the harbour. Even today, if you look past the famous name, you can still see traces of that older Portofino in the small boats, in the laundry, on the balconies, and in the quiet moments, when the day visitors have not yet arrived. In the last century, Portofino became a symbol of Italian coastal glamour. Writers, artists, and European aristocrats started to visit, followed by film stars and musicians. And gradually, this modest harbour turned into one of the most recognisable seaside addresses in the world. Luxury yachts began to anchor in the bay, designer boutiques appeared in former workshops, and the village became a favourite escape for people looking for privacy, wrapped in beautiful scenery. Yet, for all the fame and luxury, the scale of Portofino has remained surprisingly human. There is still just one small harbour, one cluster of tall houses and a handful of streets that you can cross in only a few minutes on foot. That is part of its charm. It feels concentrated, almost intimate, a place where the line between everyday life and holiday dream is very thin. For travellers today, Portofino is both an easy day trip and a destination that rewards a longer stay. You can arrive by road along the coast, by boat from nearby towns, or by local ferry that glides into the bay and gives you that classic first view of the painted facades from the water. Whether you come for a few hours or a few days, it is a place that invites slow walking, unhurried coffee, and the simple pleasure of watching village life unfold beside the sea. As we stroll around the harbour, this is a good moment to pause and understand what Portofino actually is, beyond the postcards and the reputation. We are on a tiny curve of coastline in Liguria, on the Italian Riviera, where the land drops into the sea and forms this natural sheltered inlet. All of Portofino is gathered around this small basin, with the hills rising steeply behind us and the open Mediterranean stretching out in front. It is a very small place in physical size, but with a name that is known all over the world. If you look closely at the houses along the water and the narrow lanes that disappear behind them, it helps to remember that this is not just a resort, it is a real village and a separate little municipality. Only a few hundred people live here all year, spread across just a couple of square kilometres, which means that the permanent community is tiny compared to the number of visitors who arrive each season. The people of Portofino have always been closely linked to the sea, first as fishermen and sailors, later also as hosts, hoteliers and guides. The story of Portofino goes back a long way. Roman writers already mentioned a small harbour on this stretch of coast, a place known as the Port of the Dolphins because these waters were once rich with them. In the Middle Ages, it was part of the wider territory of Genoa, tied to the Great Maritime Republic, but always slightly apart from it, tucked into its own corner of the promontory. For centuries, it remained a modest fishing and trading village. Boats came and went. Storms passed, and life here followed a simple rhythm of work on the water. Repairs on the quay and family life in the tall, narrow houses above. Everything began to change in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, when travellers from Northern Europe started to discover this coast. Artists, writers, and aristocratic families arrived first, drawn by the mild climate, the light on the water, and the feeling of being hidden yet connected. Some of them wrote about their stays here, and a popular novel set in the village helped fix Portofino in the imagination as a romantic escape on the Riviera. Gradually, more visitors came. Simple houses were converted into guest rooms, and the fishing port slowly began to share its space with an early form of tourism. By the middle of the 20th century, Portofino had become a symbol of a certain way of enjoying the sea, often summed up in the phrase La Dolce Vita. The jet-set era brought film stars, musicians, and members of royal families who arrived by yacht, checked into elegant hotels, and took the same short strolls that we are taking now around the harbour. Their photographs and stories travelled around the world, and the image of Portofino as a glamorous hideaway was born. Since then, it has remained one of those names that instantly suggests sunshine, leisure, and understated luxury on the Italian coast. You can feel that mixture as we walk. On one hand, this is still a working harbour, with small boats, ropes and nets, deliveries coming in for the kitchens, and supplies being wheeled across the square. On the other hand, you see polished yachts at anchor, tables laid with white cloths and glasses, and visitors dressed for an afternoon that will gently slide from coffee to lunch, then to aperitivo and dinner. Portofino today is both an everyday village and a luxury brand, and the two layers sit very close together. For travellers, it helps to know how compact everything is. The entire waterfront is just a short curve, and the whole village centre can be crossed in a few minutes on foot. That is why Portofino works so well as a walking place. You can move at the same speed as the scene you are watching now, following the line of the water, stopping when something catches your eye, then continuing at your own pace. There is no rush to catch buses inside the village or to cover long distances. Once you arrive, everything important is within walking reach.
Not a nice place.
Telegram.
We start to climb gently up towards the village church, the Church of the Divo Martino, dedicated to Saint Martin of Tours. It sits a little above the oldest part of Portofino, on a rise where you can look back to the water and forward into the hills. So it feels like a natural pause between the life of the quay and the quieter world above. The walk up is short but atmospheric. We follow a narrow lane that tilts upwards past small shops, old doorways and balconies with plants spilling over their railings. With each turn, the sound of the harbour softens and the bells of the church grow clearer. When we arrive in front of the building, the scene feels at once simple and dignified. This has been the parish heart of Portofino for many centuries, long before the village became a symbol of coastal glamour. The church that we see today has deep roots. Local tradition and early documents speak of a parish dedicated to Saint Martin here, as early as the first millennium, when it replaced a smaller chapel on the waterfront. The community that grew up around the bay needed a larger and safer place of worship, a little above the sea and the storms, and this slope was chosen. Over time, the original building in Lombard Romanesque style was enlarged, reconsecrated in the 16th century, and then heavily reworked in the 19th century, which gave the church much of its present appearance. When we step inside, the light changes. The interior is arranged in 3 naves, separated by columns and arches that lead the eye towards the main altar. The space is cool, often scented with candle wax and incense, and the outside noise fades into a soft echo. As your eyes adjust, details start to appear on the walls, and in the side chapels, paintings of Madonnas and saints, carved figures, and small votive offerings left by local families and sailors over many years. One of the most important works kept here is a wooden sculpture of the Deposition of Christ by the Genoese artist Anton Maria Maragliano, a reminder that even this small village church was connected to wider currents of Italian art and devotion. Around it, other canvases and statues from different centuries tell the story of faith as it was lived along this coast, from times when long voyages and dangerous crossings were part of everyday life. For the people of Portofino, this is not only a historic monument, but it is the main parish church, shared today with the dedication of St. George, baptisms, weddings, funerals, and the major religious feasts of the year all pass through this space. On certain days, the community gathers here before processions that move out through the streets and down towards the sea, blessing the village, its boats, and the work of those who still depend on the water. Through many changes in Portofino, from fishing harbour to international destination, the Church of the Divo Martino has remained a constant reference point. From the church, we make our way back down towards the water, and the sound of the harbour slowly returns. Stone steps and narrow lanes guide us back to the open space of Piazza Martiri del Olivetta, the main square that rests right in front of the water. This is the heart of Portofino, the place where village life, tourism, and the world of yachting all meet in one small amphitheatre of stone and sea. The square itself is not large, but it feels like a natural stage. On one side, you have the curve of the harbour with its boats. On the other side, a row of tall houses painted in warm Ligurian colours, their windows and shutters framing the scene. Cafes and restaurants stretch their tables out towards the open space. so that the square becomes a living dining room in the open air, from early morning until late evening. This is where people pause, talk, watch, and are watched. As we step onto the piazza, you can see why it is often described as the bustling centre of the village. The surface is paved, the space open to the sky, and from here a small grid of cobbled streets climbs gently uphill into the rest of Portofino. Along those streets you find a mix of simple grocery stores, bakeries and gelato shops beside elegant boutiques and jewellery displays. This contrast between everyday services and high fashion is typical of the village. Portofino still has the functions of a small coastal community, but it now shares the same few streets with the world of luxury shopping and designer labels. If you take a slow look across the water from the edge of the square, you will notice another contrast that defines Portofino. At the front of the harbour, there are still small fishing boats with peeling paint and simple equipment. They are reminders of the older village when almost everything here depended on the sea. Behind them, moored along the quays and in the deeper water, you see sleek motor yachts and sailing yachts, some of them many metres long, with polished decks and crews in uniform. The colourful houses and fishing boats form the backdrop, and in front of them float vessels worth several million. Piazza Martiri dell'Olivetta has become the viewing terrace for one of the most photographed small harbours in the Mediterranean. Portofino harbour itself is quite small, but very organised. There are around 220 berths in total, most of them for modest boats between about 4 and 12 metres, which are used by local people and visitors with smaller craft. A limited number of positions are reserved for larger yachts, with transit docks that can take boats above 40 metres and dedicated moorings for super yachts and mega yachts that can reach or exceed 60 metres in length. In summer, additional floating pontoons and buoys are placed just outside the entrance to increase capacity for visiting boats. For such a tiny bay, the level of service and the concentration of expensive yachts is impressive. For many visitors, this square is their first physical contact with Portofino. Cruise passengers arrive by tender, stepping straight from a small boat onto the quay and walking a few metres into Piazza Martiri dell'Olivetta. Independent travellers who arrive by local ferry have the same experience. The moment your feet touch the stones of the square, you understand why the village has become such a powerful image. Everything important is in front of you at once, compressed into one frame: the curve of the harbour, the row of houses, the line of terraces, the wooded slopes behind. It really does feel like walking into the centre of a postcard. Getting here is often part of the experience. Many visitors arrive by train to larger towns along the Ligurian coast, then continue to Portofino by local bus, taxi or by boat that glides along the shoreline and brings you straight into the harbour. Others come in by car, but the roads are narrow and parking is limited and expensive. So for most people, arriving by public transport or ferry feels easier and more relaxed. And of course, there are those who arrive on private yachts, stepping straight from their boat onto the quay. Whatever the method, the final approach always feels similar because everything funnels into this single small bay. The climate here is typically Mediterranean, with mild winters and warm, often hot summers. For many people, the most pleasant times to visit are spring and early summer, from around April to June, and then again in September and October. In those months, the days are usually bright. The sea is already or still warm, and the village feels busy but not completely overwhelmed. In the height of summer, especially July and August, Portofino can become very crowded in the middle of the day, as day trippers arrive by coach and boatload to see the famous harbour, take photos and have lunch on the waterfront. In winter, the pace slows. Many seasonal businesses close or reduce their hours, and Portofino returns more to its village life, with quieter walks and softer light on the water. This difference between the number of residents and the number of guests is important. On some peak days, there can be thousands of visitors in a village that has only a few hundred people living there all year. To protect that delicate balance, local authorities have introduced various rules to keep the harbour front calm and respectful, especially in high season. These include limits on behaviour such as loud drinking in public spaces, sitting or lying in certain busy areas, and walking around in swimwear away from the beach. The idea is to preserve Portofino as a place where luxury feels discreet and where the people who live here can still recognise their own home beneath the flow of tourism. Food and drink are a big part of the Portofino experience, even if you are just here for a few hours. The village shares the culinary traditions of Liguria, which means a lot of fresh seafood, local fish, simple grilled dishes, crisp white wines from the hills nearby, and the famous green pesto made with basil, pine nuts, and olive oil. You will also find different versions of focaccia, the local flatbread that can be topped with herbs, cheese, or olives. Many visitors like to sit at a table facing the harbour, order something small, and simply watch the movement of the boats and people walking past. It is as much about the setting as it is about what is on the plate. Of course, all of this comes at a price. Portofino is known as one of the more expensive places on the Italian Riviera, especially if you are staying overnight right in the village or eating in the prime positions on the waterfront. Accommodation here tends to be high-end, and even a simple coffee in the main square will usually cost more than in a less famous town nearby. Many travellers choose to stay in neighbouring areas where hotels and apartments are more affordable. Then visit Portofino as a day trip. Others treat a night or two here as a special occasion, a way to immerse themselves fully in the atmosphere after the daytime crowds have gone. Either way, it is useful to arrive with realistic expectations about costs, so that you can relax and enjoy the experience rather than be surprised by it. From the far side of the harbour, the path begins to rise. Stone steps and a narrow lane lead us away from the water, threading between walls, gardens, and glimpses of sea. With every turn, the sounds of the square become softer, replaced by birds, wind in the trees, and the occasional bell from the village below. Little by little, Portofino spreads out beneath us, and ahead, On the crest of the hill, the outline of Castello Brown comes into view. The castle sits about 50 metres above sea level on the ridge that closes the bay, in a position that feels perfectly chosen for watching over the harbour and the open Ligurian Sea. From here, it looks out in 3 directions, towards the entrance of the bay, over the small piazza and along the coastline that runs towards Santa Margherita, Liga. Today, it appears calm, framed by gardens and terraces. But for most of its life, this was a serious defensive post, a stronghold that protected a strategic anchorage on the coast of Genoa. The story of Castello Brown starts long before its present walls. Archaeological traces show that this promontory was used for defence, at least since the 4th century, when late Roman fortifications stood here, with a small castrum and a tower watching the sea routes. In the Middle Ages, it became part of the defensive network of the Republic of Genoa, under the name Castello di San Giorgio, one of the coastal fortresses that guarded important harbours and trade routes. The first detailed records from the Genoa archives mention the castle in the 15th century. In 1432, it played a key role in repelling an attack by Venetian galleys, and for a period it was held by the Visconti of Milan, which shows how contested this part of the coast could be. By the early 16th century, the fortifications were being updated to meet the new reality of artillery. Cannon batteries were installed, and around 1554, the military engineer Giovanni Maria Olgiati drew up plans for a complete fortress on this site. The work was completed in 1557, creating the core structure we still recognize, with thick curtain walls, bastions and gun positions facing out over the sea. For the next 2 centuries, the castle continued to serve as a coastal strong point. In 1575, it helped protect the village against an attack by forces under Gio Andrea Doria. In the 17th century, it was enlarged again between 1622 and 1624, and the inventory of weapons from that time speaks of cannons, muskets, arquebuses, halberds and spears, all kept ready in this compact but important fortress. Looking at the peaceful terraces today, it is hard to imagine the noise of guns and the tension of crews standing by at the embrasures, watching the horizon for hostile sails. The Napoleonic period brought one of the last moments of real war to these walls. In 1814, during the struggle between British and French forces along the Ligurian coast, the small fishing village of Portofino became the backdrop to a hard battle. French troops, loyal to Napoleon, barricaded themselves in the castle, using it as a stronghold until British ships forced them out. Shortly afterwards, after the Congress of Vienna in 1815, this whole stretch of coastline entered a more peaceful era, and the fortress lost much of its strategic purpose. By the middle of the 19th century, it was officially disarmed and effectively abandoned. A new chapter began when the site stopped being a fortress and started to become a home. In 1867, the old castle was sold, and a few years later it was purchased by Montague Yates Brown, the British consul in Genoa. He saw in this former stronghold the potential for an extraordinary villa above the sea. Working with the architect Alfredo d'Andrade and guided by artist friends, he had the building adapted for residential use, adding elegant loggias, romantic terraces and comfortable interiors, while keeping the solid outline of the medieval walls. On the main terrace, which had once been an artillery platform, he planted 2 maritime pines, trees that still mark the silhouette of the castle today. From this period, the building gradually took the name Castello Brown in honour of its owner. Inside, the rooms were furnished with pieces from sailing ships and houses in Genoa, combining an English sense of order with Ligurian surroundings. Paintings, maritime objects, and formal furniture turned the former barracks into a refined villa where diplomats, aristocrats, and travellers gathered. Guests included figures such as Lord Carnarvon, later famous for the discovery of the tomb of Tutankhamun, and other members of European high society who spent their summers on this coast. The real signature of Castello Brown, of course, is its terraces. From the main terrace, you can look directly down onto the curve of Portofino, seeing the small piazza, the harbour, and the line of houses from a perspective that feels almost like an aerial view. Further out, the panorama opens to the Ligurian Sea, with boats entering and leaving the bay and the coastline stretching away towards other villages. It is one of the best places to understand the shape of Portofino, how the hills close around the harbour, and how the village lies almost cradled between land and sea. Today, Castello Brown functions both as a museum and as a venue. Visitors can explore it during opening hours for a modest entrance fee, and the spaces are also used for weddings, civil ceremonies, exhibitions, and private events. For couples who marry here, the setting offers a dramatic backdrop with the village and sea far below. For art shows and cultural projects, the combination of stone walls, historic rooms, and natural light creates a very atmospheric stage. Yet despite these modern uses, the atmosphere remains relatively calm. This is still a place where you can find a quiet corner on a wall or bench, sit for a moment, and simply watch the movement of clouds over the water.
I will make a complaint. Those are cannonballs. Oh. Real ones.
In 1922, the castle entered literary history when the English writer Elizabeth von Arnim used it as the setting for her novel, The Enchanted April, a story about 4 women who find transformation and peace in an Italian villa overlooking the sea. The book became a bestseller and helped fix the image of Portofino and its surroundings as a place of retreat and renewal. Many decades later, in 1991, a film adaptation of the novel was shot here and in the surrounding area, bringing the terraces and rooms of Castello Brown onto cinema screens around the world. The Brown family held the property until 1949, when it passed to Colonel John Baber and his wife Jocelyn, who took a scholarly interest in the house and its history. They restored damaged sections and studied old documents related to the castle and to medieval Portofino. In 1961, the Babers sold the property to the municipality of Portofino, and from that moment, Castello Brown became a civic asset, open to the public as a house museum and cultural space. From Castello Brown, the path continues gently along the ridge, and before long, another figure appears ahead of us, simple and light against the sky. This is the church of San Giorgio, Portofino's hilltop sanctuary, standing on a narrow terrace that looks out over the harbour on one side and the open Ligurian Sea on the other. It is only a short walk from the bustle of the village.
Sì, che rimangono come ricordi.
Ma io non sono fotografia, ma le faccio male.
Vedo nei capelli.
San Giorgio has a long and layered history. According to the inscription inside, the present church was first built in the year 1154 in Romanesque style, at a time when Portofino was becoming an important small harbour under the influence of Genoa. Excavations made during rebuilding in the 20th century revealed traces of an even older square chapel beneath the current structure, possibly dating back to the age when Lombard communities and the monks of St. Columba were active in this part of Liguria. So the hill where we are standing has been a place of prayer for many centuries, long before tourism and yachting arrived. Over time, the church was altered several times. In 1691, it was revised and enlarged, and at the same time, the path that leads up from the main square, Salita San Giorgio, was widened to make the climb easier for villagers. A further renovation and expansion took place in 1760, giving the church much of the outline that we recognize today. The building you see now is therefore the result of successive layers of work, each one adapting the original Romanesque core to the needs and tastes of a changing community. The quiet setting can make it hard to imagine how dramatic its story became in the 20th century. During the Second World War, this hill was not a peaceful lookout, but a strategic point on a coastline that saw real fighting. In July 1944, an aircraft dropped a bomb that struck the church directly and destroyed it almost completely. For the people of Portofino, it was a painful moment. Their patron saint's sanctuary, which had stood through many storms, was suddenly gone. After the war, in 1950, the community rebuilt San Giorgio with their own funds, following the 18th century plan and reinstating the shape it had before the bomb. What we walk into today is therefore a careful reconstruction of the historic church, created with a mixture of memory, faith, and practical craftsmanship. During that rebuilding work, something remarkable came to light. In the old foundations, in a well-protected space, workers found bones that matched a local tradition recorded on an earlier tablet. According to this tradition, Portofino sailors returning from the Crusades had brought back relics of St. George and of fellow crusaders. And these remains had been placed in the church as a sign of devotion. The discovery in 1950 confirmed that the story was not just a legend. Today, the relics of St. George, patron saint of Portofino, are preserved inside San Giorgio, making this small hilltop church an important spiritual reference point for the village.
She's like, the dog has so much, it's like 2 years old, she's so much energy.
Tire him out.
Yeah.
I can tire him out. You do exercise.
We have to put on the night and then it's like...
Ma perché mi viene divertimento? Perché c'era divertimento. Amore mio.
Non so come le dai.
Quante parti ci sono?
Ma la mamma? E lì è sparita.
O quasi no, che da tutti stanno qui.
Leaving the church of San Giorgio, we follow the small path back down towards the village. The sea appears and disappears between the trees, and with every step we feel ourselves moving from the quiet of the sanctuary back into the everyday life of Portofino. This is a good moment to talk about the culture of this little place, how people celebrate throughout the year, and what it means to live in a village that is both a community and a world-famous destination.
c'ha la qualità e tutto
Portofino is deeply shaped by three things: the sea, the church, and the rhythm of Italian village life. Almost every tradition here comes from some combination of those elements. On the religious side, the most important date is the Feast of St. George, the patron saint of Portofino. Every year on the 23rd of April, the village celebrates with mass processions through the lanes and a great bonfire that lights up the main square beside the harbour. In the evening, the bay glows with firelight and often fireworks, and the celebration turns into a social gathering where people eat grilled fish, drink wine, and sing together by the water. As we start to descend from the church, we can imagine those same steps filled with villagers carrying the statue of St. George on their shoulders. On the feast day, the path from the harbour up to the sanctuary becomes a living ribbon of colour and movement, with banners, candles, and voices. For visitors who happen to be here in April, this is one of the best chances to see Portofino as a small Ligurian community, not only as a luxury resort. Behind the polished image that you see in magazines, there is still this very local, very heartfelt devotion. The calendar of Portofino follows the wider pattern of Italy and Liguria. Holy Week and Easter bring their own atmosphere with special liturgies and, in many coastal villages, processions that remember the Passion of Christ. Across the region, you find confraternities in white or coloured robes carrying heavy crucifixes and symbols through the streets, accompanied by music and chant. Even if Portofino is small, it is part of this network of Ligurian traditions where faith, music, and public celebration are intertwined. As we arrive once more at Piazza Martiri del Olivetta, with the harbour opening in front of us, we step into the main stage for many of these celebrations. This square is not only a place for coffee and photographs, it is also where the major events of the year come together. During the Feast of San Giorgio, the bonfire that closes the celebrations is lit right here, sending sparks into the night sky. On other dates, the piazza hosts concerts, open-air dinners for festivals, and moments when the whole village comes out to mark a special occasion.
Era un piatto stato.
From the harbour, the path towards Cannon Bay feels like a small escape. We leave the square behind us, follow the curve of the road out of Portofino, and within a few minutes the village begins to sit behind our shoulders rather than in front of us. On one side we still have glimpses of pastel facades and boats. On the other side the rocks drop to the sea and the water looks a little wilder and more open. Somewhere ahead, tucked between cliffs and pines, is Cannon Bay. The bay lies just outside the built-up curve of the village towards the direction of Santa Margherita and Peraghi. It is close enough that you can easily walk here from the main square in less than 10 minutes, yet far enough that the noise of the harbour fades. Guides often describe it as one of the three little pearls of Portofino, together with Nyasca and Olivetta, and many locals consider it one of the most scenic corners of the entire bay. For such a famous coast, this is a surprisingly simple place. Cannon Bay is really just a small pebbly cove set in a rocky inlet with clear water, a sloping seabed and a distinctive block of conglomerate rock that locals call Puddinga. On top of that rock stands a single maritime pine, almost like a natural flag marking the spot. Around it rise low cliffs and the terraces of villas, and in front of it the water shifts through shades of turquoise and deep blue. From the beach, you also get a beautiful view back towards the headland and the heights of Portofino. To reach the water, you leave the pedestrian path and return briefly to the main coastal road. A little before the Hotel Piccolo Portofino on the seaside of the road, a modest staircase in metal drops down from the guardrail to the rocks below. A small brown sign points to a public beach rather than to a private club. From above, you may see the outline of a pale villa and the bright line of the cove. As soon as you start down the steps, traffic disappears behind the bend and the sound of the sea takes over. At the bottom, you arrive on the stones of Cannon Bay itself. There is no long stretch of sand here, just a small fan of pebbles and flat rocks that narrows quickly to the cliffs on each side. The seabed close to shore is made up of rounded stones and patches of sand, then becomes rougher as the rocks continue underwater. The Puddinga block with its pine rises from one side, giving the cove a very recognisable profile. It is the kind of natural feature that stays in your memory, especially when you see it against the colour of the water on a clear day. Cannon Bay is officially a free public beach. There are no entry fees and no sunbed lines or cabins. In a coastline where many stretches of shore are occupied by private beach clubs. This little pocket of rocks and pebbles feels pleasantly simple. That simplicity does come with a few conditions. There are no changing rooms, showers or toilets on the cove itself, and no bar or shop right on the water. So anything you need, you have to bring with you, and then carry back up the steps afterwards. Thank you for walking with us through Portofino. We hope this slow journey along the harbour, up to the churches, the castle and the quiet bays has brought you a moment of calm and a little inspiration for your own travels. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to our channel and leaving a like. It really helps us continue creating these documentary walks. Tell us in the comments what you liked most about Portofino. Was it the coloured houses around the harbour, the views from above, the small coves, or the peaceful atmosphere of the churches? We read every comment, and your ideas also help us choose where to film next. Thank you again for watching and spending your time with us. We will see you in the next video.